Good morning, everyone. So glad to see everyone here on this fine morning in July. We're here with Bryce Maxell, who is the director of the Montana Natural Heritage Program. And we have an exciting presentation for you because Bryce is going to talk about how you can get involved as citizen scientists, but he's also going to be able to show you what that looks like both from the web-based version of the iNaturalist program, as well as being able to demonstrate what this looks like on a mobile device. And so that I think is a real key to helping your patrons know how they can get involved and how they can get out into the field and be contributing to Montana's natural heritage data sets and that. So with that, Bryce, I would like to turn it right over to you.
Great, thanks, Calais. I'm going to go ahead and start by just sharing my screen here. And hopefully you're seeing that.
Yes, sir.
Great. And I want to say that iNaturalist is a wonderful companion to our Montana Field Guide. And sort of the two underlying things that I want to make sure that you're aware of are, one, people can use this to really understand the plants and animals that are around them all across the world, really. And then they can use it to submit data that's actually used by resource managers. So it's a double value there. So we're just going to introduce you to iNaturalist today. And I'll start by talking about the value of it to the Montana Natural Heritage Program, and then we'll go through some examples of using it. And the focus of this is how to submit data, but I'll go through other aspects of it. We long have realized at the Montana Natural Heritage Program that we need to take data in whatever format that folks want to give it to us in. And we're really encouraging both the agency personnel and just the average citizen in Montana to submit their data to us via iNaturalist. iNaturalist now has the statistics in the upper portion of this slide. They are 166 million observations for 430,000 plus different species and 338,000 people identifying species across the world. In Montana, almost 300,000 observations for almost 8,000 species, and almost 88,500 different people are identifying. And then also in terms of people submitting data, almost 16,000 different submitters. So you can see the coverage across Montana in that middle image and across the world in the left image. And you can see that this in the right image in the middle there, that the trend over time is growing and growing. And there's some seasonal increases in the summer and dips in the winter. The table there shows you different numbers of observations that we are getting for different animal and plant groups and fungi as well. So now we have, we're approaching 60,000 plus observations that we've added from iNaturalist into our database, and then that information is available for natural resource managers. So it is really just an exciting time for citizen science and using this information. In terms of its value to us, we really are encouraging not only the average citizen, but also natural resource managers, because they may see a spider or a beetle, or anyone may, that they don't know what it is. And you can quickly take a photo, submit it to iNaturalist, and learn what that species is, so that the next time you see it, you know. And so it becomes kind of this addictive thing, and it just fosters appreciation for the plants and animals that are around you. We've been working with other natural heritage programs across North America, and we now have a list of greater than 700 experts that are working in iNaturalist to identify things that get submitted. And then we know that we can trust that those observations are correctly identified with them. And so you can do things like subscribe to taxa in your local area so that you know when flowers are in bloom, or when birds arrive and things like that. And then you would get something like if you subscribe to them, on the bottom left image is an example of an email that you would get in the morning, telling you about where those observations are and when they've been reported. We have some really exciting conservation stories that are coming out of iNaturalist. We can get things like this greater shorthorn lizard image on the right side of this slide that is just they're very rarely observed in the state. And we just had this huge increase since we have people wandering around with phones in their pockets. When they see a little pocket dinosaur like this, they're not going to not stop and take a photo. And so we've been getting a lot more observations of species that are rarely detected. The next image over there, meadow jumping mouse, you can see in this red line in this image was the previous range extent we thought of this species. And then we had an observation pop up in iNaturalist. Someone just saw one in their backyard and was able to take a photo of it. And sure enough, that was that species, meadow jumping mouse, and we were able to extend the range out to that purple range. And then our predicted habitat suitability models, we modeled the distribution of this species, and the models predicted its presence there even without using that observation in the modeling. So exciting stuff. The next one over, short-styled columbine. We had our zoologist out in the field, and he was just taking photos of a pretty columbine, submitted on iNaturalist, and later realized that this was a species of concern in Montana, and that population hadn't had any records reported for it for 40 years or so. So cool addition there. And then the two on the left, Palmer's amaranth and rush skeletonweed, are two examples of noxious weeds that were reported. Palmer's amaranth, the first observation in the state, and rush skeletonweed, the first recent record east of the Continental Divide that we were able to pass on to weed managers, and they were able to jump on them and spray and control those populations. So really exciting stuff coming out of iNaturalist data being submitted by the average citizen. In terms of how to use it, essentially all you need to do is get on your app store and download it via your Google Play if you're on an Android device, or the App Store if you're on an Apple device, and then create an account, log into that account, and then we can show you how to submit observations here. Essentially, the summary of how it works are people walking around with their phones, seeing something cool that they either know or don't know what it is, take a photo of it, submit that, share that with hundreds of thousands of people around the world that are using this application. And sometimes you might have, like, for instance, a beetle expert that lives in Singapore. Actually, there actually is a bumblebee, or a bee, actually he's more of a bee expert that lives in Singapore, who identifies bees all around the world. And so, you can make use of this huge worldwide community for identifying observations to species. And then we can use that information for a variety of purposes. So let's bring up the iNaturalist website, and hopefully you're seeing that now instead of my PowerPoint. Give me a yell if you're not.
Looks good.
Okay, great. And so this is the iNaturalist website, and we're just gonna kind of take you through a little tour of it. So if you didn't have an account, you would create an account with the sign up here at iNaturalist.org. I'm going to go ahead and log in to mine, and then what immediately comes up is your personal dashboard. And I just want to give you, there's a lot of menus here, but I want to give you a brief tour of some of the things that you can do. Under your dashboard, so that's clicking on your image in the upper right, you can have different account settings. And on your dashboard, now that we're on the dashboard here, we're going to scroll down, and we're going to practice subscribing to something. So I've subscribed to all the amphibians and reptiles and all of the weed species in the state. But essentially the way you could do that is you can either subscribe to a place and you would get maybe, let's say you want to subscribe to any records that are reported in Jordan. You could say subscribe to place. Let's see if Jordan, Montana is in here. I haven't checked that. Oh, Jordan country. Nope, doesn't look like Jordan, Montana is in there. What county is Jordan in? Remind me. We had a person from Jordan.
Garfield.
Garfield, okay. Garfield County, US. There we go. So you could say, I want to subscribe to Garfield County. And then you could say, I want all, you could say animals. You could say fungi. You could say plants. And then what you would do, what you would get every morning in your email would be something like this. You would get records that have been reported in Garfield County. You would click on them. And then you could say, okay, I've got this prairie rattlesnake record, and you can click on, no doubt about it, that is a prairie rattlesnake. And then you can help out identify things. We're looking at this one is near Fairfield, and the date on it is August 28th. And I agree. And then you've done your little bit to help identify things. Let's say you don't really know, you aren't really sure. You could look at the entire account for prairie rattlesnake and see the time of year that those observations are reported. You could view a large variety of photos that have been submitted in iNaturalist and kind of get a sense for how to identify that species. What are the consistent markings or morphology of it? And so that's kind of an example of sort of your daily interaction. If you, again, we go back to our dashboard, if you go down and hit subscribe, probably recommend that you subscribe to a place rather than a taxon. A taxon is a taxonomic entity. So if you said, I want to see all spiders, you're going to get those worldwide. So you probably want to subscribe to a place. And that, again, will allow you to say what place you're interested in. It might be all of Montana, or it might be a county or a city or something like that. And then you can say, I want these species. So you could say, I want to see Western shooting star, so that you know when those are in bloom, and people are reporting them in your area, and then you could go check them out yourself. Some other things that I want to point out with iNaturalist are this Explore tab. And you can use the Explore tab to select a species. And let's say I'm interested in northern alligator lizard, and I just want Montana records. And so then we can see all the records in Montana, and you could click on any individual record, and then open it up, and again, check out the photos. Some of the photos are quite spectacular, but check out the photos for that species, where it's at, the date that it's observed. And then you could, let's see if I've already checked it. Oh, I have not checked this one out, so I'm going to agree with that identification. Another thing that you can do in terms of the identifying side of things, you could go literally to the Identify tab, and this can help speed up identifications. Let's choose that northern alligator lizard example again, and we'll say all across Montana. And then I can do additional filtering on that, and I can say I want any of them that are casual, needs ID, or research grade. I can, and then I'll update my search. And then I'm seeing all of the northern alligator lizard records in Montana. And it looks like in this case, most of them I have already reviewed. But again, this would be a great tool for seeing just the variation that you might see in a species as you're trying to identify it. Let's go through an example now of how to upload data, and I'm going to do this in two different ways. We'll do it first via the desktop on a desktop computer. So I'm going to hit the upload button here in the upper right. And then I'm going to just navigate to where I've got some photos stored, and I will go ahead and drag and drop those. And if you're uploading them this way, these I just took this morning on my way into work, and I'm gonna select them all, and then I'm gonna put a location in for them. And then so it's gonna take me to a map, and I'm gonna zoom in on that map. And go ahead and record the location. And I'm going to update the observations with that location. And then I'm going to go ahead and pick the date, the 30th. And oh, it looks like my location didn't load for the other one. Go ahead, add that. Let me add those dates. 30th. And then we can identify them, and it's already once we've clicked in here, do you see how it's already identified what the species is? So it has an artificial intelligence built in. All of that huge collection of photos that iNaturalist has got from across the world, it's using to identify this as perennial sow thistle, which it is. But let's say I'm questioning that a little bit and I want to view perennial sow thistle first. I can click view and then go to that main account for perennial sow thistle and kind of look through the photos. What do the flowers look like? What do the leaves look like? Maybe I want to look at the whole collection of them. And also maybe I want to look at a map of where the observations are for this species. So yep, I'm fine with that. Perennial sow thistle as the identification. Field bindweed, I definitely agree with that. Classic heart-shaped leaves and flowers here. I've got another perennial sow thistle, which I'm gonna stick with. And then let's see what this one, this is actually just a Canada thistle, which is also known as creeping thistle, Circe marvens. And so again, see how it's bringing up these suggestions of ones that are kind of matching up on the photo front. And you'll see here, it's visually similar and it's expected nearby, meaning it's been reported in the nearby region. So we can go ahead and select creeping thistle. And so I've got dates and locations on all of these. I'm ready to submit them. And now other people in the iNaturalist community will go through and they will add their identifications to it. And if three or 2/3 of people agree on the identification, it will be labeled as research grade. You can see here, I'll click on an observation that I made actually out on a trip to Lake Pend Oreille of a hoverfly that someone actually had killed because they thought it was a bee, but it was just a hoverfly. So I grabbed that little carcass and showed it to him and told him that it was a hoverfly for one thing. And then we had several, I didn't know what kind of hoverfly it was, but we've got 2 people here that have agreed that it's a Western aphid eater. And so a great animal to have around if you want to control aphids on your plants. So and so now let me show you a different way of that. I just went through how to submit an observation via your desktop, but let me go ahead and show you. I've logged into this meeting with my phone as well. And so let's see if I can do this. We will share my phone screen.
While you're doing that, Bryce,
Yeah.
those observations and seeing that happen in real time like that, and seeing the power of the AI to have those suggestions is, I think, really neat. And I know several folks are thinking about their patrons who, if they aren't already doing this, are probably going to help them jump
Yeah.
into the pool, as it were.
And one thing that it will do that is uh, one thing that helps out on that front is you may not get to the species, but it may tell you, hey, this is a hoverfly. And then that allows people who have subscribed to hoverflies, again, could be someone on the other side of the planet. I see people identifying records in Montana from Europe and Asia all the time. So we're making use of a worldwide community. The one other cool thing that I'll mention while I'm thinking about it is I see a lot of teenagers using this app, and this is going to be our next generation of biologists. These are the kids who would have been in years ago, would have been in your local library, kind of hounding you for any plant or animal book on the shelf. And iNaturalist is now a way for them to interact, and it's just really cool to see that, because these definitely will be our future biologists and experts. So okay, so let me show you how to submit an observation via the phone app. We're looking at that. All I'm going to do is click on that observe at the bottom of my phone. And you can see previous observations all kind of in a line there that I've submitted recently. And then I'm going to say camera. And when I came into work this morning, it was not too hard to find a weed in the parking lot. So I've got a spotted knapweed here. And so I'm going to just take a photo of a couple photos of that. I'll use that photo. And then I'm going to take one more photo where I focus on the one of the flowers. And I'll use that photo. And then I can click on what did you see? View suggestions. Let's see what it says here. It got us there, didn't it? Spotted knapweed. So it says visually similar and expected nearby. And I use this a lot because it's a lot quicker than typing it in. Even if I know what it is, I'll use this, this tool, because then I can just click on it. So then I'm going to just share that. And then it's out there. It takes just a second or two to upload, but then it's going to be out there again for that iNaturalist community to review. And again, those people could be all over the world. So just really cool. One other one that's grabbing my attention here on the same trip I was on, this flying saucer beetle. Let's see if I can. Oh, you're seeing here we go. If I turn it out, there we go. So there's this, I knew it was a lady beetle that landed on our boat, took a photo of it and submitted it. And within a few hours, we had an identifier saying that's a flying saucer lady beetle. I looked it up and I concurred that, yep, that's what I had seen. And so I changed my identification to flying saucer beetle as well. So I'm going to stop sharing here on my phone. But again, you can see how relatively easy that is. Literally take a photo. You'll see that the location gets added, because it's your phone is georeferenced, or at least you can set your phone to being georeferenced. And then you don't have to identify it to species. You can say, all I know is that this is a plant. All I know is that this is um, a shrimp or something like that. You do not have to identify it to species. Take it as far as you can and then hit submit, and share it with the world, and they'll identify it. I didn't mention this earlier, but or I did mention it briefly, but we are working with around all the heritage programs across the US and Canada, and we now have a list of 700 plus experts that we can if they identify it to a particular species, we can trust that identification. And then our workflow is basically automatically once a month download all of the expert identified records, and that goes into our database. So this is has really been a huge time saver for us, but also a great way of getting all these detection devices, phones in your pockets, in use. At the same time, it's really getting the average person out there who's just curious about what is around them. It tells them what species are around them. So it's a great way. And after you've done that a couple times, then you know yourself what that is. So I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint again here.
And Bryce, I did
Yeah.
have one quick question
Yeah.
too. With the mobile app, can you, I mean, if you don't have cell service, if you're really out far afield,
Yes.
does it allow you to capture that information? And then when you are, online again, is that a possibility?
That's correct. That's exactly what it does. All it's doing at the time is geo-referencing where you're at, and capturing the photo, and then you can upload it at any point in time. One thing that I do when I'm out of cell phone service is I choose not to, or I will share the observation, but then I'll go back if I'm not certain of what I think it is. I'll go back, and before I hit the upload button one more time when I'm back in cell phone service, I'll switch the ID on it after I've done a little bit of research sometimes. And again, this is a great companion. Our Montana Field Guide is a great companion for that, to go look at what you think you've seen. So okay, so let's just wrap this up. I wanted to mention that we will send some other let's see, am I sharing? I'm not.
Not quite yet.
Okay, here we go. Thank you. So that's essentially the basics of how it works there. There's a lot more functionality and kind of details that you can get into. There's some helpful help videos that are present within iNaturalist. But the basics of it are just super easy to use. And then I wanted to mention that we will get this out for everybody's use, a PDF of this PowerPoint, and we've put together a list of resources. So that includes videos within iNaturalist, some videos that we have made on how to use it, that could supplement this video. And then at the bottom here, we have a list of people that are iNaturalist users that are willing to help identify things for you. So if you're really curious and nobody's identifying a plant that you've submitted, you could go back to that observation and in the comments say at PL Acuff or at Scott_MT, could you help me identify this plant? And that will ping them within iNaturalist, and then they'll take a look at it for you. These are people who have agreed to look at various taxa. I went through this, but this is kind of a step-by-step walkthrough on setting alerts for different species. Again, step 1, go to your dashboard. Step 2, go to subscribe. Step 3, probably subscribe to a place. Choose that place, choose the plant or animal or fungi or lichen or whatever that you're interested in. And then step 5, you're going to get that morning email. And again, you're not this is not overwhelming. You can ignore the email, but it's maybe a great way to learn what flowers are in bloom in your area, or to learn how to identify a particular species, and just learn a little bit more about, when people are observing it and where they're observing it. Another thing I wanted to just say, we will walk you through that identify. On the step 1, go to the identify tab. 2, pick your species and your location. Go to that additional filtering, and then review them. And then again, adding entered observations to the Montana Natural Heritage Project. I didn't actually talk about this, but if you're on a particular observation, over just to the right of those observations is a projects, and you can add them to the Montana Natural Heritage Observations Project. That's not really that big of a deal unless I'll have to get into a little bit of detail as to why this is a value. Some people do not want to share observations that are precisely mapped because maybe it's on private land. And so they don't want to share that with the world. And you can mark your record as I want this record obscured, and it will show up in a very generalized big kind of block, but you won't be able to tell it's on this, this ranch or this property or whatever. But you could still submit it to the Montana Natural Heritage Observations Project, and then we would get the precise locations, and that would be able to be used by natural resource managers. So this is sometimes a value for species of concern and submitting species of concern data. And since I'm mentioning that, I want to mention what the protections that are put in place on species of concern. We, the Montana Natural Heritage Program, have worked with the BLM, the Forest Service, Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and the Montana Native Plant Society to go through, and any species that we think is at risk of exploitation in Montana, we've said that species just needs to be obscured in general. So doesn't matter who you are, if you submitted a record of, say, an orchid, that record is going to be obscured, or some of the orchids. On the reverse side of that is iNaturalist typically will obscure species of concern records, but if we didn't think that they were at risk of exploitation, we said that obscuring can be removed. So, and I think that really gives you guys a good overview of things. And again, we'll share this PowerPoint with you, and then we're always available to answer questions. So, but happy to answer questions now if you've got any.
Thank you so much, Bryce. Yeah, if I know that we're coming to the end of our time, but I put the evaluation link in the chat, and we will be posting the resources, both the recording and, as Bryce mentioned, a PDF of our slides for you to be able to share. It's really nice to have those like labeled step by step, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think that'd be really useful if you're wanting to do a program in your library to be able to utilize those resources. But yeah, if there are any questions, if anyone wants to unmute or use the chat, we'll hang out here for a couple more moments and address those questions.
And again, if you see those young kids who are searching for the plant and animal books, you might want to send them this direction because they would eat it up.
Without a doubt.
Yep.
We have several who are saying that they can't wait to use this information, and will be sharing it as soon as they can.
You can use it. Actually, the first time I used this, I was just curious, how does this work? And I used it to identify one of my house plants that I didn't know what it was. So yeah, you can use it on pretty much anything.
That is very cool. Yeah, actually, I need to add an observation. I have it's like a pale-faced paper wasp. I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
now I've got it in a jar
Yeah.
sitting behind me. So now I want to add that observation in. We've had more of those this year than I think I've ever seen before.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. Something you don't, you know it's a wasp and that's it. So you could submit it at wasp and then somebody who's interested in wasps from the other side of the planet can help you identify it.
That is very cool.
Yeah.
Um,
No, you don't
oh,
have to use it on just wild plants. You can use it on garden plants as well. When garden plants get submitted, typically they'll get marked as a casual observation. Um, and yeah, that's not, it's certainly a valuable tool for identification of those species. There's not really conservation value in submitting those records, but you could certainly use the identification tool. And if you want to just identify it and not submit it, that's cool. If you wanted to go ahead and submit it, then somebody will probably mark it as again, a casual and not a wild. Actually, you might want to go ahead and mark it as not in the wild yourself, but yeah.
so that's a question then that, based on that, so in order to use the tool for identifying, you have to have a login. You have to have signed in. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay,
Yeah. In order to submit observations, you're going to need to create an account. So,
that sounds
yep.
good.
All right. Well, again, I'm available anytime folks want to email me. It's just bmaxell@mt.gov. Happy to answer any questions on this.
Oh, and Denise has another quick question. What is the taxon for flowering plants only, or is that a subphylum?
You can just type in flowering plants and that'll take you to let's see, what is that? Anthophyta? Yeah. You can type in the common names and it will translate and also list the scientific. And they do a variety of crosswalking there. You know, there are certain taxonomic frameworks that recognize a particular species under an older genus maybe, and then that's been updated and it crosswalks that for you. So
That's awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Bryce.
yeah,
We will touch base again and we'll get those resources posted as soon as we can, probably by the end of the day today.
sounds good. Thanks, Calais. Thanks,
All right,
everybody.
thanks. Have a great day.